When two Microsoft programming veterans decided to invest their newfound wealth into a video game company, most people thought they were just wasting their time. And when they started making huge claims about the technology that would be featured in the game, most publishers refused to believe them. But Sierra took a chance on them and after a year-long delay, finally released the game in 1998. It blew away all expectations, and for years afterwards, Half-Life was the game all others were compared to, and Valve was the studio that other developers wanted to beat. But they were about to discover that Half-Life had a whole second life beyond Valve. The incredible success of Half-Life made several things apparent. First, Valve would survive their gamble and prosper. Second, the world needed more Half-Life.
Mike and I, given our backgrounds in operating systems and productivity software, we're pretty sure that we were going to fail, that we had no real reason to think we were going to be successful. In general, from a business perspective, we tend to be more anxious than self-congratulatory. The question is not how has the work we've done previously been received, but what it is that we should do next.
Valve knew that their next project would take some time. So during the interim, developer Gearbox Software was tasked with creating a Half-Life expansion pack, Opposing Force, which was successful enough to let them make a second expansion, Blue Shift. The games took the innovative approach of staying in the exact same time and setting as the first game, but telling the story from a different character's perspective. Opposing Force starred one of the Marines that Gordon Freeman had to fight through, and Blue Shift starred the hapless security guard Barney. Like Half-Life, they were both also titled after scientific principles. Opposing Force is Newton's third law, and Blue Shift is the Doppler effect. But while they sold well enough, these were not to be the offshoot projects that people remembered. The art of modding, when players dug into the game's code and changed it to make new games, was accepted by some studios, like id Software, and rejected by many others. Valve decided to open the floodgates to the modding community, since many of their employees came from there.
One of the things that was characteristic of Half-Life was that it was adopted pretty wholeheartedly by the modding community. Mike and I both have operating systems backgrounds, and when you develop operating systems, you're almost always thinking of the value that you create as being indirect, that you build tools that other people use to create value for consumers. There's not a huge difference between what you do to be a good tool for a Fortune 50 company as opposed to what you do to be a good tool to, two kids in Western Australia who are developing Team Fortress.
With so much of Half-Life's code up for revision, it wasn't long before a boatload of mods hit the internet, a few of which have risen to near equal status with the game they stemmed from. Day of Defeat was a World War II shooter, and Team Fortress was a popular Quake mod ported over to Half-Life at Valve's request. But Half-Life's biggest mod also happens to be the biggest, most popular, and most successful mod in history: Counter-Strike. A team and round-based multiplayer shooter, Counter-Strike was a nearly ground-up rewrite of the original game. The rigid structure of the rounds was a stark contrast to the mad, free-for-all orgy of madness common in multiplayer at the time, including Half-Life's. Its first beta was released in June of 1999, and barely a year later had garnered so many downloads that Valve brought the modding team on board. Valve would go on to acquire the rights to all three of these mods, all of which would be given future iterations as commercial products. Developers often don't release their source code because they fear theft or competition, but Valve had proven that an open relationship with the gaming community actually increased sales. After all, to play Day of Defeat or Counter-Strike, you first had to buy Half-Life.
The more you reach out and the more you trust and the more you partner with your communities, the better the entertainment experiences are and the more profitable your business is going to be in the long run.
Unlike most games, which sell a lot of units at release and then tail off, Half-Life kept on selling as gamers kept getting more and more reasons to play. But despite all these other projects, the number one question on everyone's mind was what Valve itself was up to next. As the years passed by with no word whatsoever coming out of Valve, rumors and anticipation started to mount. Not until E3 2003, 5 years after Half-Life was released, an eternity in the gaming world, did Valve finally show their hand. And while outside developers and modders are great, Valve was to show once again that nobody makes Half-Life like they do. Tune in next time to see how great expectations come with great risk.